I'm so tired. Is anybody else tired? I'm just like really tired today. That's I feel like that's my life in a nutshell. Just tired. The movie starring me. So earlier this week, I finally got around to sitting down and watching the movie Luca, which is Pixar's newest movie about a young boy in the Italian Riviera. And I had been meaning to see it for a while because I had seen trailers for it and the premise kind of intrigued me. And I really wanted to see what the whole movie was all about. So I sat down and I watched the movie and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a cute little movie. But one of the things that really kind of stood out to me in the movie was the music that they used. And I'm not just talking about like the original soundtrack that was composed for the movie, which of course was still really beautiful and gorgeous, but I'm talking about the pre-existing music that they kind of inserted into the movie. Of course, some of it I was familiar with, specifically the classical music end of it, but some of it I also wasn't super familiar with. But of course, I thought all of it was very beautiful to listen to, especially the fact that it all happened to be Italian music, which was perfect for the setting. But it really struck me as a very interesting choice to do for the overall movie. Obviously, they had original music composed already for the movie, so why this choice to throw in music of Italy? Well, as I sat down and decided to do a little bit more background research on the specific songs that they chose and used for the movie, I suddenly realized how the music that is used in Luca is a brilliant example about how we share our culture through our music. Now, obviously, this is not the first time Pixar has done something like this before. I think the true masterclass in sharing culture through music is the movie Coco, but that's because Coco is very on the nose about that message. I mean, the movie is very much about music and culture. Those are the two things it really centers around, so of course the movie is going to be able to show how we share our culture through our music. All right, we're back. I had a little moment where I thought the mic situation was gonna be all funky. Okay, anyways. But like I said, Luca shares its culture through much more subtle means. It's not as direct about the culture. Maybe some of it is because, you know, many of us in the West are a little bit more familiar with Italian culture right off the bat, as a lot of Italian culture has seeped its way down and influenced a lot of other Western cultures. But you know, another big part of it might also be that that just wasn't really the focus of the movie. That wasn't really what the directors were going for, but still they wanted to implement this whole, just the overall culture of what it's like to live on the Italian seaside. So when I decided to do a little bit more digging into these songs, I realized exactly how Luca communicates not only specific moments of Italian culture through its music, but also kind of demonstrates really well how we ourselves can sort of also subtly share our cultures with other people around us. It doesn't have to be, you know, our Italian culture if you're not Italian, but we can also do similar things to what I saw being done in Luca in our own everyday lives. But to better explain this, I'm going to go through the whole list of every single non-original song that I could find in the movie and break down exactly how it not only shares Italian culture, but if it was, you know, part of the actual in-world music rather than just being music that's being played over a montage, to then talk about how it also gives a good example of how we can share our culture with others through the music. Oh, and also a quick note, I'm going to do my best to avoid spoilers. The instances in which of these songs occur don't really happen into spoiler-heavy moments in the movie, so I won't be talking about much anything else outside of the music. But if you're trying to avoid almost anything and everything about the movie, so you kind of go in it as blind as possible, then maybe go watch the movie first before you come back to this video. But like I said, I'm not gonna get too spoilery about it. So of course, first of all, right off the bat, this movie does a great job to show that this is going to share its culture. Because the very first thing we see is obviously the intro credits, you know, the Walt Disney Cinderella Castle. But along with that, we hear a song right away that is not an original song. And that song is Umbacho a mezzanotte, which is a 1952 Italian song. It's kind of a pop Italian song for its time, being the early 50s. It's kind of got that jazzy vibe to it. And it was popularized by the Quartetto Cetra, which was a popular Italian vocal group of this time period. According to the background information I could find on this particular song, this song seems to be a pretty classic, standard Italian pop music piece. But not only that, it starts off with that kind of fourth wall vibe, music only the audience can hear, but it quickly transitions into more of a faded kind of crackly kind of sound, and we see that it's actually being played from a record player that a fisherman had brought onto the boat, which already starts off by showing one way that we kind of subtly share our culture with others. I mean, music is a part of culture. In a way, music kind of is culture. And when we play our songs, especially for other people to hear, we're kind of sharing a little piece of that culture with others around us, whether that be our friends, whether that be our family, or whether that be the next generation. Now, there was no young kids on this boat. It was just two men sitting on this boat listening to music, but it was this popular Italian piece that they start off listening to. Then immediately after that, we already jump into our next example, which is O mio bambino caro from Gianni Schicchi by Puccini. This is a classic piece, and we switch from going from this popular 1950s sound to going back into the 19th century with Puccini's music. This song is so iconic. I mean, they put it in the movie for a reason. It's because everybody really is able to recognize this piece. It's a beautiful operatic aria whose story of the opera is also based on another classic piece of Italian literature, which is Dante's Inferno. So here is another great example of how we're sharing this Italian culture. We've got this classic Italian operatic aria from this classic Italian composer that's based on classic Italian literature. Now, I don't know how many different levels the directors were going for when they picked this particular piece. However, I did notice that the Italian pieces that they used didn't come from non-Italian composers. I mean, when we're talking, especially in terms of opera, classic Italian operas or operas that are in Italian, there are plenty of examples from non-Italian composers, but all the ones that I could find that were in this movie that were of the operatic tradition rather than the more popular ones, all were from Italian composers. And I thought that was a really good choice for them to do in this movie, because you don't want to just pick random pieces that are in Italian. You want to pick stuff that's going to share that culture. And this particular song, this particular opera, does a really beautiful job with that. And then, of course, the O mio bambino caro comes back again when Luca fixes the record player by just sticking the handle in and turning it to get it going again. But this moment when the record player comes back to life suddenly kind of shows how we can pass on traditions to the next generation. You know, originally it was these two older gentlemen on this boat who were listening to it. So you could maybe dismiss it as the older generation listening to music of their youth and just enjoying it. But it's when the two boys play the song again that sort of kind of symbolizes how we can pass that tradition down on to the younger generation. It's not just music that sticks with the old people, it's music that we can then go on to share with the younger people as well. The next song that we see come up in the movie is Il gatto e la volpe, and it plays over a montage when Luca and Alberto are dreaming over what it would be like to have a Vespa. Actually, correction, it's when Luca specifically dreams about the Vespa. So it's not any kind of real world use in the movie. It's not being played for the characters. It's just kind of, again, that fourth wall for the audience only, basically. But the use of this song is still really interesting because the whole lyrics of this piece in particular are about the characters of the cat and the fox from the story of Pinocchio. So obviously, if you've watched the movie Pinocchio or if you've read the book Pinocchio, you will know about the cat and the fox characters and how they're kind of the little tricksters that lead Pinocchio off to do things away from what he's actually supposed to be doing, which is going to school. And this song sings about those two characters and kind of tells their story a little bit. Again, really picking pieces that are sharing Italian culture on a whole other level. So this song is purely meant for audience entertainment and enjoyment, but it's not just some casual Italian piece, it does tell a cute little story. And here is yet another great example of how we can share culture through our music. So for centuries upon centuries upon centuries, one really great way, especially prior to any kind of development of written language, one really great way that people could pass down stories from one generation to the next, and stories they felt were really important, was through the use of music. I mean, for some people, I know for me in particular, music can kind of help certain things stick in your mind a little bit better. I remember when I was young and I was always growing up, if I had anything that I had to memorize for school or anything like that, I would always put it to some kind of song, because then I would immediately recall almost every little bit of what it was I was trying to memorize if I just sang up a little song about it. And the same can be true when we're talking about important stories. If we don't just keep it as like a story we're telling, if we turn it into an actual song, sometimes that can be a really great way for an older generation to pass on an important piece of either history or just a moral story down onto the younger generation. And obviously this song used the story of Pinocchio, which again is another really great classic Italian literature piece. I mean, many of us know the story of Pinocchio, how he's this little boy who was turned from a puppet to an animated puppet and was promised that if he's good, then he can be turned into a real boy. And then, of course, Pinocchio doesn't really do what he's supposed to be doing, and he kind of goes off and misbehaves for a bit until he finally realizes what it means to be good. I mean, we've all watched the Disney story, right? If you've seen Luca, you probably have Disney Plus and can go watch Pinocchio. But anyway, moving on to the next little bit, which wasn't a super explicit song. I mean, most of these songs were kind of listed in the end credits scene, so I could just go and type it in to Google and do a little bit of research on it. But this next one, I had to catch on my own as I was kind of rewatching to figure out where all of these songs were in the movie. And I caught this one again completely on my own and had to go do some research, and I could not remember the name of it, and I just kept typing an Italian gondola song because that was the only thing I was like, I know it's from some opera, but I don't know what opera, and I don't know where to start. And the only thing I can think of is that it's been used from gondola singers. Sometimes it's thought of that way, but I found it. I found it just for you. You're welcome. And that song is Ledana Emobile from Verdi's Rigoletto. Another classic operatic aria classic. But yes, you've probably heard this one before. Da 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 da. A little low for me there. And this is just briefly shown being whistled by a villager. So again, not enough to actually list it in any kind of meaningful way in the credits, but it's still there. And it's still an Italian piece. And it's still an Italian piece by an Italian composer. Why? Why is there so much detail here? Why is it? It's so good. It's so good. And this is, again, sort of another little subtle way on how we pass down songs from one generation to the next. I mean, yes, you can pull out your fancy record player, but why use a record player if you can just whistle songs for you to listen to? I mean, yeah, I kind of mean that in a joking way, where like, why actually buy records when you can just hum it or sing it. But in all honesty, when a record player isn't always available, you know, what do people do? We sing it or we whistle it, whichever you're better at, because I know not everybody's great at both or either or. But moving on from that small little detour, we go back into the actual main songs. The next song we see is Andavo a cento all'ora, which is sung by Gianni Morandi. Now, this guy, unlike the previous quartet that I did research on, I couldn't find anything terribly significant about the previous quartet. Doesn't mean that there wasn't any kind of significance to them. It just means that I wasn't able to find any kind of quick offhand research. So if you know more about that quartet, feel free to talk about it more in the comments. I would love to hear more about it. But this guy, Gianni Morandi, he's a little bit of a different story. So this guy, Gianni Morandi, is considered to be one of the cornerstones of Italian pop music. So he was around, I was saying was for a lot. He is still alive, so he's not dead yet. Good for him. But he is considered to be a cornerstone of Italian pop music. So getting his career started in about the early 60s-ish, with this song in particular being his debut song. Now, it was relatively common during this time period for most people to more so do a few cover songs to get popularized before actually starting to compose his own. So this song was not composed by Morandi. However, it was his debut song and really what got him started. But we see this song being used in the movie when we first run into the real Vespa instead of just the dream ones that Luca and Alberto kind of dream up. And Ercole comes in on his Vespa and this song is playing. But in the context of the actual movie, we see this song being sort of played on the radio that Ercole has on the back of his Vespa. But here's another good example of how music kind of shares our culture and the things we find important. Obviously, Morandi is a very significant cultural icon in Italian culture, and so of course his songs being played on the radio is kind of a showcase of that. I mean, too often anymore we don't really hear songs on the radio because we don't as often turn songs on the radio, which is more of a recent development within, I'd say, like, whatever, I'm gonna go with it. Which is more of a recent development within, like, say, I'd say maybe like the past 10 years or so. But, you know, when people did listen to the radio more often, that's kind of how you knew somebody hit this kind of, you know, a whole different level of being famous or a whole different level of making an impact on the culture, is if their songs were being played on the radio. So not only are we sharing culture just by playing the radio, but it's a whole different level than actually just getting on a record player and just playing the song on your own, because that kind of shows like this is songs that you like and you want to share with other people. But the radio shows a different level of how popular a song has gotten, because it's not just one individual wanting to listen to a song, it's the culture and the people of a culture collectively coming together saying we want this being played in a much more public format repeatedly because we enjoy it that much. But the next kind of song we see is Tintarella di Luna, which is briefly played on Giulia's radio before she kind of bikes away from the boys. So it's like at their first kind of meeting, but she bikes away. It's a really brief moment. So again, I'm not going to talk too much about the actual use of this because we just talked about how radio spreads culture, but the actual singer of this song is Mina, and she is once again a really big, significant Italian staple in terms of Italian music. From the little bit of background research I did on her, she's considered to be one of the greatest Italian singers of all time, probably specifically talking and referring to the pop music realm, but she's considered to be a great Italian singer and has gotten praise and acclaim from many other major cultural icons such as Frank Sinatra and Louis Armstrong. So you know that, like, even though I've never really heard of her because most of her songs tend to seem to be in Italian, she does seem to be a very, very big Italian singer. So playing her songs on the radio, again, kind of show how big she's gotten and how much of a cultural icon she's been, and that shares it with other people. But moving on to the next example, we have Largo al Factotum, which is a very famous piece. I mean, most people know this as the Figaro piece because it's Figaro is singing about himself. Now this comes from the opera Barbara of Seville by Rossini. So again, another Italian composer, but however, the opera itself is not based on Italian literature. This time it's actually based on French literature, which is about a story that takes place in Spain. So none of that is Italian. People now kind of consider Figaro to be more of an Italian kind of character rather than being a Spanish one as he technically is in the opera. But anyways, that's not quite as important because he's now become this kind of Italian icon, this Italian kind of character that people associate with Italy. And this song in particular is, again, really, 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 really famous. But once again, we see this song being played through a record player, but this time it's Giulia's father who is playing it in his home. So this is probably likely a song that Giulia's father really enjoys and to listen to, and it's probably also a song that Giulia herself is probably very familiar with. So again, we're not just talking about it's just one instance of a song being casually played, it's one that is being passed down onto the next generation. I mean, think about the songs that you listened to when you were growing up as a kid. That now informs part of your culture, right? Because you just heard it so often. So things like this song are now informing Giulia's culture and the stuff that she grew up with. She's going to grow up and be able to tell people, oh yes, I'm very familiar with the song because my dad listened to it all the time in the home. But moving on to another little brief moment, we have, oh gosh, this is a long title. So, hold on, let me get my thing. So this one's Fatti mandre dalla mamma a prendere il latte. It's a very long title. But anyways, this is another little song by Gianni Morandi. So we already talked about him a little bit, the kind of cultural icon that he was, but the real cool significance about this song in particular is this is kind of his first song that's an original, rather than the previous one that I talked about where he kind of was using somebody else's song to gain that kind of popularity. This is Morandi's first kind of original single, if you will. And it doesn't really have too much of a significance in the movie. It's just kind of one of those little dream sequences that we see with Luca. But that doesn't mean the song itself doesn't have any kind of cultural significance. The next little song that we see is Viva la Papa col Pomodoro. Viva la Papa col Pomodoro. So this song actually comes from a TV show called Il Giornalino di Gian Burrasca, but the song seems to have gotten more popularity than the actual TV show did because it wasn't like a long-going running TV show. It was just sort of a mini-series based on a book of the same name. But the song from the actual TV show really seemed to gain a lot of popularity, hence kind of its use in this movie. Now, in the actual movie, it doesn't really serve too much of a cultural significance. It's kind of played fourth wall again. It's the song that they use for the training montage in this movie. But of course, this song still has that kind of cultural significance. Although this time, instead of coming from a standout Italian singer or iconic Italian group or anything like that, it comes from a TV show. I mean, think about nowadays how many TV shows that we know of that also have its own iconic music. I mean, if you're talking just in terms of theme songs alone, I know the Friends theme song and the Office theme songs tend to be pretty well known in American culture. Now, this song didn't seem to be the actual theme song from the TV show. It was just kind of used in the TV show as far as I could tell, but it's still gotten a lot of popularity. But not only is this just like sharing the culture of the music, but it also can easily tie back to the actual TV show that it came from. And again, TV is another great way of sharing our culture. But not only that, I also did a little bit more research and found out that the title of the song, the Papa col Pomodoro, is actually an Italian dish. So there you go, another really great example of Italian culture. So going away from the pop music, we once again go back into the operatic music with Una voce poco fa, which is one of my favorite little arias. It's such a fun one, and I already did a video on it if you want to learn more about that song and kind of what the lyrics mean. But anyways, we see this example being used when we're back again in Giulia's house with her father. And if there's one thing we've learned about Giulia's father is that he really seems to like a lot of Italian operatic arias. So kudos to him, because he has good taste in music. But again, this song is from Rossini's Barbara of Seville. So I won't say too much more on this song because we've already covered Barbara of Seville. We've already covered the record player, which it seems to kind of be coming from. It doesn't seem as direct, but assuming that the last time we were in Giulia's house, her father was playing a song on the record player, it seems to make sense that he's probably also playing another song on the record player here. But I won't go too much more further into it. I'll just kind of leave it at that. And then of course, the last song that we have is Città Vuota, which is another single by Mina. This one, again, doesn't have too much of a significance in terms of the movie because it kind of just plays at the end credits. But this song still is pretty significant in terms of who Mina was as an artist. So unlike the previous one, which was her original actual debut song, this one was a song she sang that kind of re-debuted her after she took a long break from RAI, which was the Italian recording company that she was kind of signed off with. And they had had some back and forth, not so good blood between them. And this was kind of her re-debuting song of I'm finally coming back out in the public and I'm going to be my own person. And this song really hit big for her. In fact, from what I could tell with my research, this song was like in the top 10 immediately and then stayed that way for like 6 months on the Italian pop music chart of its time period. So again, really big and important song of this time period. And from what I could tell, every single song they use in this movie was very carefully curated to be that way. They weren't just kind of meaningless, oh, let's pick this Italian song because it's fun. I don't know exactly if the director himself had any kind of significant ties to each of these pieces, if these were all songs that he grew up with, but at the very least I could tell that each of these pieces had some kind of significance in Italian culture. And of course, when they were shared in the movie, they did a beautiful job of displaying how we as people share our culture with others around us through music, whether that be through record player, whether that be through radio, whether that just be through singing. And I thought it was really, really beautiful. From what I thought was just going to be a fun little video where I kind of talked about just the fun little pieces that I noticed in Luca, it ended up turning into a whole lot more than that. And so I'm really glad that I took the time to learn a little bit more about the music that was shown. So yeah, of course you should go and watch the movie Luca if you haven't seen it already. Of course, if you don't have Disney Plus, I don't know. I hope that they release it in some other kind of alternative format as well, because I really think this one deserved to be, you know, put in the theaters. I don't know why they didn't do that, because it was really such a cute and fun movie, and you should go see it yourself. But anyways, if you like this video and you'd like to see more of it, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I put up videos basically every week where I sit here and I talk about music, either music history or the culture of music or just anything fun about music that I feel like talking about. Like this video here this week, whatever. But anyways, subscribe if you feel like subscribing and you want to see more of this. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Goodbye! Into the movie. The movie. But through much more subtle memes. Jeez. Transitions. But it quickly I'm having issues with that word. O mio babbino caro from Gianni Schicchi by Puccini. I don't know if any of that made sense. And then of course the O mio babbino caro, and then of course the O mio babbino caro. I'm just fumbling over my words today. It's getting hot in here, so keep on all your clothes. I don't want no nudists in here, please. Go do that somewhere else. We're just gonna roll with it. I'm gonna do a lot of editing of this stupid video.